All right, let's talk about our listing edit screen. For this exercise, I decided to type all the code first and then explain it to you because the steps are very repetitive and they involve a lot of typing. So I didn't want to waste your time. So in this video, I'm going to go through what I have done. But once again, you can find the completed source code in the zip file that I gave you at the beginning of the course. So here we are importing 4 components from our forms folder. We have app form field, exactly like before. We have a new component, app form picker. That is a picker that we use inside a form. Let me give you a quick tour of this component. This component is very similar to our form field. So we're using formic context to get these objects, errors, set field value, touched, and values. Here we have an app picker and an error message. For our app picker, we're setting 4 props. We set items to the items that we get here as a prop. We're setting onSelect item. This is an event that gets raised when the user selects a value. So here we need to programmatically set the value of this field in formic. So in this function, we get the selected value, which is an object, and then call setFieldValue. We specify the name of the field, which we get as a prop, and the selected value or the selected object. Next, we have the placeholder and the selected item. I'm setting this to values of name. So values is an object that is available in formic, just like the errors and touched objects. It has a key value pair for every field in the form. So this is pretty straightforward. And then we have our error message exactly like before. Now, back to our listing edit screen. Here's my validation schema. So in this form, we have 4 fields. We have title, price, description, and category. Title is a string. It's required. I set the min to 1, so the user has to type at least 1 character. For the number, it's also required. Here I supplied a range of values, so the price has to be between $1 and $10,000. Description is just a string. It's not required. Now, category is an object. It's required, and it's nullable. This is the only tricky part that you had to deal with. Now, here's my list of categories. For this exercise, I just added 3 objects in this array. All these objects have a label and a value, exactly like before. Now, here's my app form. Nothing magical here. The initial values is an object with these 4 properties. Now, title, price, and description, I've set all these properties to an empty string. So even though price is a number, inside the form, it's represented as a string. So I didn't want to initialize this to 0. Otherwise, we would see 0 in our input field. So that is why I set it to an empty string. The category is an object, so it's going to be one of these objects. We either have a category or not. If we don't have a category, this property should be null, okay? Now I accidentally put a breakpoint. Let's remove that. So next we have onSubmit and validation schema, exactly like before. Now inside this form, we have these fields. We have a form field. Here I applied a max length of 255, so the user cannot type more than this number of characters, okay? I gave this field a name. This is used by our form component. And here we have a placeholder. Now for the price field, I set the keyboard type to numeric, so the user can only type a number. I set the max length to 8, because the maximum price we assume for this item is going to be $10,000, right? So we have to count for period and cents. So that is totally 8 characters. Here we should also set a name and placeholder. Next, we have our app form picker. Here we have 3 props, items which we set to our categories, as well as name and placeholder. And finally, we have another form field for our description. I made this field multi-line and set the number of lines to 3. This only works on Android. So on Android, our description box looks bigger. On iPhone, it looks exactly like other input fields, but as we type here, the text box starts to grow, okay? So that's pretty much it. Now, one last tip before I finish this video. If you don't like these names, if you think this is too long, you can give it an alias. So on the top, we can give this an alias. We can call it form field, and we can call this one picker. Now, we can go back to our form and rename these to form field. And this one is going to be picker. So that makes our code a bit cleaner. It looks nicer. The problem with this approach, though, is in every form, we have to apply these aliases. The other approach is to rename these components, but the problem with that is name conflict, which I talked about before. So I leave it up to you to choose the approach that you prefer.